Hello and welcome to the latest episode of I'm Not a Player, I'm a Gamer podcast. Your regular host, Miles Tarry here. We are currently getting ourselves into the early teens, late teens of podcast episodes now for something that started off as let's see, I might do a couple of episodes, see how it goes sort of thing. The thing has blossomed and grown, and I'm super thankful for everyone who's already got involved so far. Feedback, as always, has been incredible. So just keep that coming my way. Obviously, I need the negative feedback as well, guys. If you can find something, anything, tell me my lighting needs to change. Tell me I need to adjust my background because at the moment I've still moved into my new place. It's all at the moment there's a birthday card in the corner. It can be worked on. So any feedback that you guys have, let me know. Today's episode, I am joined by VikkiKitty. We're going to go through Vicky's entire sort of career as far with esports and everything else, and I'm super excited to get stuck into it. So, how are you today, Vicky? Important to say, Vicky's already saved a life today prior to this recording. So
Yeah. It's been quite an eventful morning. Aside from the eventful history of esports this morning, I was able to save a baby bird. It is in the middle of spring, so not something that I would have really expected in my morning walk, but something that I'm very happy to do. Now she's resting in the backyard, but that was definitely not something that I had in my itinerary when I woke up.
I think you can add it to all your social handles now. It's not just commentator, but it's also animal saver. So for people who are tuning in who may have heard the name, hopefully they have heard the name because I know very much if you're involved in esports, there's a lot of games that you've already been involved in. Who is, I guess I say it to everyone, I guess, is who is Vicky? Like what brings you to the world of esports?
So I started off with being a Smash Brothers commentator before I eventually, a few years later, moved up to doing Overwatch Contenders and then eventually Overwatch League. And then hand by hand with Overwatch League, I was able to start casting the Apex Legends Global Series. But this was all within a journey of now it's been 9 years. So it's been very interesting. I've been able to work with a lot of interesting companies as well. But my first experience that really kickstarted everything for me must have been when I started working with Nintendo, where my first big event was San Diego Comic-Con and E3.
And now, speaking as a Brit who has to endure, we have our London Comic Cons and Manchester Comic Cons, which compared to San Diego, which is the top tier level, like what is the experience of Comic Con like? Like it must be surreal. Like there's so many different just brands, let alone people there. Like is it just a surreal experience as it looks?
It was. Honestly, looking back at it now, it was the first time I traveled by myself, and I was 19 years old. No, sorry, I just turned 20, and everything was brand new to me. I had not really traveled on my own, so that was the overwhelming part. And then you get to the venue, and San Diego Comic-Con was huge, but it was a surreal experience for me. It was also the first big con that I have also attended, and that's beside the fact that I also went and worked it. So that was its own experience. I was able to explore as just a normal attendee and then being able to work it. I was specifically assigned to cast a 12 and under tournament with a current Nintendo employee as well. So that was all like a firsthand experience. Getting to know more of the back end side of the industry was the number one thing I took from that entire trip. And I realized in that moment, like, wow, like aside from this being San Diego Comic-Con, and I think it was also around the time that Pokemon Go like had come out.
The big boom.
So yeah, it was
Everyone's walking around with their
2016.
phones just in large crowds going, there's a Pokemon in this corner. I'm telling you, follow me.
And it was extra crazy because at San Diego Comic-Con, I'll never forget this because I was one of the crazy people to do it. Everyone was like talking about rumors of like the different legendary birds coming out only at San Diego Comic-Con, exclusively for San Diego Comic-Con. And people were all waiting outside of this like theater where they were having a speech with Niantic and the Pokemon Company on what to look out for. And just side note, there was no legendary birds. There is nothing that came out there. but it was the experience of being there during the crazy like phase of Pokemon Go that added on to the experience that I will never forget.
It's almost too easy for the guys at Pokemon to just be like, right, we're gonna put an event on. How do we make sure that everyone's gonna turn up to this event? Everyone's gonna come. Just say there's gonna be a legendary Pokemon there. They'll come flooding. I still see people now walking around with the Pokemon Go. I remember during like the lockdown and COVID situation, like when people were allowed to go outside, Pokemon Go was that's how it started for me. Like I'd always sort of ventured into it that way, and seeing people still doing it now is crazy. So I guess with Nintendo, is that how things started for you? Like I'm thinking even earlier than obviously like your professional career. Like when you're young in your household, did you start with Nintendo? Were you Nintendo 64 or did you have any consoles like that?
Oh, so yes, the first console I ever played on, funny enough, was a Nintendo. It was the SNES, and it wasn't mine. It was my uncle's. And we didn't have a very large age gap too. I have a rather young family, so he would go off to high school while my grandmother would take care of me, and her and I would sneak into his room when he didn't know it, and we would play on his SNES. And I always loved being Luigi because I liked being green for some reason, and she was
Obviously.
Mario. So, yeah, right? So that's how we were able to really, like, find that passion because she kinda started everything for me. My grandmother and I just playing video games together, and then from the Nintendo games, it'd even be, like, the Disney PC games that
Mhm.
I don't know if some people would remember, but there were some online, like, Little Mermaid games that you could play, and like, Little Mermaid and Melody, so, like, Little Mermaid 2, and then the PlayStation games with the Disney games with, like, Bugs Life, where it was
Oh,
a huge one for me, Tarzan. Um,
Tarzan on the PC. I still to this day would happily
yes.
sit and play that game. For I remember Tarzan and Toy Story very early on. The Toy Story games again on the PlayStation was so fun to play.
It was always a very staple thing growing up in my childhood, and Nintendo was that family console to have at your home, but I actually didn't see my own personal console till, I don't know what year it was, but it was my favorite Christmas I could always recall because I grew up, in a very traditional household where girls shouldn't be playing video games really. And my dad was a huge gamer. My parents being as young as they were, my dad was very much into Counter-Strike and Call of Duty. But that was for boys, I was told, not for girls. So when he would go off away from his setup, I would sneak on, just like I would sneak into my uncle's room to play his SNES. And I would hop on my father's account and I'd play CS:GO. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like 3, 4 years old, but I knew I was having a lot of fun doing it and it would keep me entertained for a while. But my first console was the GameCube, and it was on a Christmas where it was like the last gift to be given to me. It was more like a, hey, check the garage. I think something's there. And it was hidden underneath like a laundry basket. And I would never forget how crazy I flipped. That Christmas was also the same Christmas that I believe I got Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. I got both of them in
Oh,
one Christmas.
nice. Now, who did you pick? Who was your start Pokemon?
Okay, so for my favorite game to play because I liked in this case it's funny, it's flipped. In this game I liked red more than green, right? Whatever. So I picked Charmander for Fire Red, and then in Leaf Green I had to pick Bulbasaur. Like I wanted to follow, I guess, with the tradition, but that like Nintendo was always like the first console that I really started playing, and I think that's where my love of playing games in general started because I also, my little sister and I have a pretty big age gap. So I was an only child for a majority of my childhood up until I was roughly 7 to 8 years old.
So I guess like any form of competitive gaming as you got older was through, I'm assuming through friends rather than directly in the house. Or did you ever have that opportunity to like play against you were saying like your uncle? Did you ever get your chance to compete with them, or were they always strict and no, you're on your own? You had to get that competitive nature yourself.
That's a really good question. Because I actually never thought about that. I actually never competed with anybody closely related to me or ever felt like I was in a competition with anyone. I think because I started growing up in an age with like Modern Warfare 2 and these other Call of Duty games, I was able to be exposed to like the more online competitive scene at a very early age. No one ever played with me because I was also the oldest young sibling, or
Mhm.
rather young cousin in the family. So Everybody else, like older than me, were adults. Like they were off doing their own thing. But I was like the oldest cousin in the family, so everybody below me would, I guess, try to compete with me. But since I was much older than everybody else, no one would really like fare up against me, and so nobody really wanted to play with me. Not like that, and I was rather competitive naturally. Like nothing was brought on to that. It was just I was a very competitive person. Like even with Melee, when I had the GameCube, Smash Brothers Melee, my whole goal was making sure I can unlock every character, and I wouldn't go online to like Google or on the Internet Explorer wondering like how do I get this character to unlock? No, I actually figured everything out on my own because it was like a little game for me.
Yeah.
Where as long as I don't open the book where it told me how to unlock characters or go online, I was able to do it and figured it out without anybody helping me, kind of like a puzzle. So I was very stubborn. And when I would unlock like Mewtwo, for example, in Melee, I just was like, I'm awesome. Like I'm so cool. Or I think it wasn't Mewtwo. I think that was for Brawl, but I just felt so cool about it. And I think that's kind of where my competitive nature came from.
Yeah, people understand that like once upon a time when you're playing video games, to unlock certain things, you were either buying like a magazine, so like PlayStation magazine, Xbox magazine,
Yeah.
all these magazines, or you got a manual with your game. And then like this would teach you how to play a game. And like kids these days would just be like, no, you click a button and it's downloaded. It was a completely different world. And I get the competitive nature thing that you're saying, because when I was growing up with my sister, now we have a 2 year age gap, but she wasn't remotely interested in any of the sort of competitive game. I always talk about we played Mary Kate and Ashley on the PlayStation. This was the level of
Yes.
we were doing like horse riding simulator on Mary Kate and Ashley, and that was our way of being nice. And then don't she go, I'd load up my Rayman and everything else, and I'd go back into my and I was the same. Call of Duty is probably where I had to get my competitive. Like I was thrown into the deep end of this is Call of Duty, this is COD 4, this is World at War. And you're forced to be competitive because people are calling you out. They will not hold back when you're online. They
Oh
don't know who
no.
they are. It's very much still like some of the toxic nature that we have now. People will hide behind a keyboard, but they're on a microphone and they will say what they want, and they will force you to get angry, even if you don't want to get angry.
That I think that's what really sparked everything for me. Looking competitively, my gamer tag even comes from losing a 1v1 bet in Call of Duty Modern Warfare
Oh,
2. You know, VikkiKitty sounds all cute and stuff, but I lost a 1v1 against a gamer that I still am in touch with. We've never met before, but you know, it was one of those online friends that
yeah.
we made for that, you know, we connected. His gamer tag was Mr. Fuzzy Kitty, and he told me that if I lost against him, I would have to join his clan. And he had a clan of like 15 people. Like all of us were the same age, goofing around on Modern Warfare 2. And I lost a bet, so I joined the clan and I stuck with the gamer tag all throughout like any gaming platform I joined.
So I'm trying to think. It's funny to mention that. So like I still have people that I continue to stay in contact with, and we're talking the best part of, so I have to do maths on how old I am. We're talking over 10 years at least, of people that I've never met before in my life. But like the days that we'd play Call of Duty and just communicate from that, and now it's obviously developed into you have Discord communities and everything else. It's amazing how many people I'm still probably in contact with just through the early days of competitive gaming and just being called out and going, actually, I've held my own against them, and you build like that mutual respect and friendship just from an online game. Super Smash Bros. Then, so for someone that doesn't isolate, now I don't play Super Smash Bros, but I love watching it. It's one of them games. It's similar. There's a few games that like I don't play Rocket League, but I can watch people play Rocket League forever. And I think a lot of it actually comes down to the way that it's casted and the commentary that you have on these games. It keeps you so engaged with it. And now I had the joy of meeting Hungrybox 2 years ago at the Esports Awards. He was just the nicest guy. And then whenever I'm asking him questions and stuff, and he's telling me all about the games and stuff, it got me hooked. But what is it about that game that's so appealing for yourself? Obviously, you mentioned about the grind of like unlocking characters and stuff, but does it fundamentally formulate from that?
Moving on from like when I grew up with Nintendo and those characters, I feel like because they were like household stapled names, that definitely helped bring me back to Smash, because obviously from the time when I was playing it on either the GameCube or even back on the Nintendo 64 for Smash Brothers 64 and all that, there was a gap of me not playing Smash Brothers until I got older, and we would basically meet up in different houses and we'll have like Smash Fest and we used to all play. And this was when I was just completely casual. It wasn't until when I started college that I learned that there was local competitive scenes in my area. And I have never competed in any gaming tournament ever in my life, but I had an ego from back in the day that still carried over, that was like, I still played solo player games, but I think I still got it. I did not have it. That was a different level.
You get humbled fast.
Oh yeah, it's a different feeling when you are like the best in your friend group, and then you go to a tournament in your backyard, and you're like, wait, people do this for a living.
Yeah.
And I think that exact sentence right there, that people do it for a living, that people were that good, is what got me, because now it re-sparked that competitive nature that I've always had, but it was more of like a drive. I wasn't one to compete in sports. I played volleyball and tennis, but I didn't have that competitive drive. I didn't have the thought of wanting to be better. What can I do differently to be better? But when I started playing Smash Brothers and getting introduced to the competitive scene, my local scene first carried everything for me. The people, the relationships I've made, my friendships, the professional relationships, everything under that umbrella, they they carried my entire experience as somebody who was brand new, wanting to get involved in the competitive scene. And I will say that up and down that South Florida was, especially during Smash 4, because that's when I got involved in the competitive scene. I was not involved in Melee or Brawl. And there was a family already there in Brawl, so that everybody was very integrated, but they did not close that family. They left it open for everybody, all the newcomers. And I think that made me feel very welcome. And from there, in addition to that new sparked competitive feeling I had, I started digging into things that, what can I do better? What can I do to be the best? That was literally all my mind occupied in my first 2 years of college was, I want to be the best in Smash Brothers. It was not me wanting to be a commentator or a tournament organizer. I just simply wanted to become the best competitor that I could possibly be. And when I started figuring out things like mind games, conditioning, all these little things that I never have considered or put that similar thought to anything, because I didn't play chess, maybe as a kid or, anything like that. I understood it from a different point of view, and I was hooked. I was very addicted to the idea of growing mentally and being better than others and seeing that path, that journey as a competitor.
Yeah, I love the mental side of it, because everyone assumes that it's just a good hand-eye coordination when it comes to a lot of these games, but you've got to have the mental capacity. When when you see the guys on the main stage as well, you've got to take that into account, that there's a lot of pressure on you. Like, there are people watching the way you perform, and you are always going to perform differently. People will perform differently at a LAN event to they will to an event that's online, just because there's a completely different level of pressure. Turning that sort of mental side of it, then you mentioned obviously Comic-Con was like the late teens, early 20s. Where did you go from there? How did you push on from the Nintendo work at Comic-Con? What sort of happened next for you?
So from San Diego Comic-Con being like that first big experience of working with a company like Nintendo, I built a really great relationship with the company. They were very in tuned with making sure that the family-friendly style of Nintendo, as they've always held themselves, kind of stays true to what events they wanted to plan, while still trying to keep themselves involved very briskly in bringing a new scene into competitive Smash Brothers, like specifically making sure that kids who may not know how to get involved with competitive Smash may have their own opportunity in their own bracket to participate in what would be a tournament format, whether it be the San Diego Comic-Con 12 and under tournament that I participated in casting, or even their online tournaments. That next step, though, with working with them was them asking me to commentate, I believe it was E3 2017, and it was to introduce Pokken for the first time on the Wii U, as well as ARMS. I believe it was ARMS. Yes, for the Wii U. Man, ARMS has been out for a while now,
Yeah,
actually. Wow. Was it 2017? I have to double check, but I believe it wow, it was
That's just to
2017.
say, it sounds about right. It sounds like 7 years.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah, so both of those games, and understand that I never casted a game that wasn't Smash, nor did I play. These were two new games, so obviously I had not played any of these games. So I was a bit apprehensive because for me, as a commentator and first starting out in those few months, I was able to talk about my personal experiences as a competitor and understanding matchups and characters, positioning and stages as a competitor. But now I'm treading through new territory with two games that I'm essentially announcing for the first time at their E3 stage. And anybody who remembers the Nintendo E3 booths or was able to see pictures of it, we're talking about, this was 2017 E3 was before I believe it was opened up to the public. I think it opened up to the public the year after in
That sounds about right.
2018.
It was the late, yeah, it would have been 18 or 19 when it was public.
It was around that era. So that means that when I was able to talk about ARMS and Pokken, I met the CEO of Nintendo at the time, who was Reggie. And that was a crazy dream of mine since I was little. And so I met Reggie. I was able to meet Charles Martinet, the voice actor of Mario. I met the music composer for Banjo and Kazooie. Like, we're talking about these legends that I like, me nerding out in the back, but trying to be super cool. I'm like 21, fresh, like when this was going on. And I'm just like, wow, this was a dream come true. But I have to focus on what I'm here for, which is making sure I deliver these two games to the best of my potential. On stage with us was also the creator of ARMS. And it was an amazing experience, but also a big learning experience for me because I was also able to learn two new games that I was able to play for a very short amount of time, while also casting an invitational that they brought on content creators of all sorts and personalities on stage to play these games. So it was an amazing experience, and it further deepened my connection, my working connection with Nintendo, because that was one of the many E3s that I was able to work with them going forward.
So I guess I thought I was going to have to do a bit of like a Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse and backtrack and ask a question, but you've sort of helped me out a little bit with. So obviously you've gone from competing and you're getting more and more involved in that. How did you know that casting was for you? So obviously we had a little bit of a mention there. You said like you've done like a bit of theatre stuff. Had the theatre stuff been happening prior to this? So you already had. There's got to be a crossover there, right? Is that where part of it's come from?
When I was in high school, theater was everything I wanted to do, but it was nothing that I really correlated with commentary. Funny enough, the way that I got involved with being a commentator was I was at one of my locals for Smash Brothers, competing just as I usually do every Thursday nights in Pompano Beach, Florida. And the tournament organizer at the time, who I give him all my thanks. It was an amazing experience working with them. He eventually was promoted with working with Nintendo for some time. He was the main tournament organizer for the local South Florida scene. He just gets on this big mic that radiates through the whole venue, and he goes, Vicky, we need you to commentate. Me never casting. I was like, why me? Why did he just call me out? But I walk over and I'm like, do you really need me? He's like, you're casting with me. Come on, let's do it. And I sat down and I casted with them, and I had such a fun time. Like, we were kicking it. It was like two friends talking about a game that we both really love. It was just a normal conversation. What so and so was doing, what they could be doing better, what the matchup entails, what these different stage picks are gonna do. And we were laughing about it, making jokes. And the chat was loving it. And that, for a local, you don't really see a lot of people on the Twitch channels for these different smaller tournaments. For a local, though, versus Gaming Center at its prime was pulling in like 500, 600 people watching. And that's just for a local. Like, we're not talking about regional or major. And I actually didn't know so many people were watching. It wasn't until I got off the mic. I was like, thank you so much for having me. It was super fun. I got off the mic and my social media was blowing up by a lot of them, funny enough, were actually Floridians, like like Smash Florida people from NFL, CFL, like Treasure Coast, like a lot of supportive people within my state were like, yo, you killed it. That was amazing. Like, you have to do that again. And I was like, really? Like, I just was talking about the game, but for sure, like, I'll consider it. And that's how it started. Like, I was just pulled into the booth and I said, I'll give this a try. And from there, I casted my first regional where Hungry Bucks was at. I think it was a venue called Gods and Monsters or something of the sort. And it was in CFL, so like closer to the Orlando area. And it was a very big Smash 4 tournament regionally because we had Florida at the time was one of the best states in the entire world, even considering like the talent that Japan was bringing over when they were able to compete. I mean, we had talent like Esam. We had Mewtwo King, who was still competing in Smash 4 and Melee at his prime. H-Box was there. So many people. So many people. I know a lot of people have moved now, but Mudace was there, who is now one of the best players in the Smash Brothers scene, best Peach pioneers. He was a baby going to those tournaments. MVD. So many names, so many names. You had the best Lucario there. I digress, though. It allowed for a lot of experience for commentators who were local to get to cast some of the best players in the world. So I was brought on to casting a regional not even a month after my first time hopping in the commentary booth. And I think that was the biggest learning experience as a commentator on pacing, working with co-casters of all different sorts, and learning players that aren't just from your own region.
So after a lot of Smash Bros and the Nintendo work, was Overwatch the next game that you moved on to? Was that next to the, how did that transition go? How did you go from a lot of the Nintendo work to I guess there's always elements that cross in all these different games, but how did the transition go from that to then Overwatch?
So casting Overwatch was like a dream of mine, and no one knew about it because in the Smash scene, usually people only play Smash. It's kind of like the joke. Nobody like plays any other games, not even other fighting games. Like that's not true, obviously, for everybody, but that's like the meme of the community for other scenes. And so I never really talked about it, but we talked about my roots being within CS:GO and Call of Duty and all that. I've always been much more of a fan of FPSs than fighting games. I actually, this is gonna sound ridiculous. I played Street Fighter for the first time 2 weeks ago.
No way.
Since Street Fighter 2, I like dabbled in Street Fighter 2 as a little kid, but I've never played any other Street Fighter. I've also never played Mortal Kombat. Like, so I guess I follow under that meme, right? Like I'm one of the Smash players
you
that
back it
didn't
up.
play.
I mean, it's the evidence is there, I guess.
I'm walking proof of that. So, yeah, I just didn't play many other games, but I did play Overwatch more than I played Smash Brothers, even at my peak of competing. And I was addicted to Overwatch. Like it was like a different vibe of competition that I just, and I would quietly play. I was actually a solo queuer. I tried playing on mouse and keyboard, but to this day I have issues with my left wrist that would get really like swollen. I don't have carpal tunnel, but it's something I don't know what it is. That maybe it could be muscle memory, that my hands just are just not used to being so far apart from each other when I'm playing a game. So I played Overwatch in the most casual way that I probably would still play, being on a controller. And so I would solo queue, I'd play on a controller like I always had been, and I would climb, and I solo queued my way in the early days of Overwatch as a solo one-trick tracer main. And then before navigating to Zenyatta and playing more support, but no one knew about it in Smash. I was just grinding Overwatch, and I grinded Overwatch every single day that I was home. I would play more Overwatch than Smash Brothers because for me, I never had fun playing Smash by myself. I can move around in training room. I even had coaching with Cosmos. Cosmos used to have a coach that he shared with me. And this is when Cosmos was in high school. Gosh, I feel so old saying that. But this is when Cosmos was in high school. I've known Cosmos since he was 17 and I was like 20, 21. And that was the only time I ever played Smash online, Smash 4, that is. So the only type of entertainment I got playing at home was from Overwatch. And I always wanted to cast it. Never knew how to get involved because I'm seeing these huge names from other titles like Zoe coming from StarCraft, World of Warcraft, Dota, and all these crazy games that I'm in little old Smash Brothers. You know, we're grassroots, so you don't have that dev support like that. So, you know, yeah, I've casted for amazing companies, but it wasn't always considered in the same competitive esports umbrella as these other games have been, Riot and all that. So I kept grinding Overwatch without thinking that I would cast it until I got the call one day to go to Taiwan in the summer of 2017. 2017 was a pretty crazy year, I guess. In the summer of 2017, I was in the middle of an internship because I was also a full-time college student when all this was happening. And I was in the middle of an internship with Viacom. We talked about theater. I also worked with Viacom for a little bit and helped put together 2 shows on Nickelodeon, Latin America, Nickelodeon, and BET, or sorry, MTV. But in the middle of my internship, I got the call of, hey, do you want to go to Taiwan? There is a fun Overwatch opportunity there. It's just for a weekend. It's more of an invitational, nothing official, so you don't have to be scared. You know, and we know that you haven't casted it, but we want to bring some Smash Brothers talent into the scene, and you're one of the people that we had in mind. I have never said yes so fast.
Who says no to that? Who in the right
Right?
mind goes, no, I'm fancy that actually. No, I'm good, thanks.
I jumped on that opportunity, and me and a fellow other Smash commentator, his name is Austin. He now does more multiverses and all different games. We jumped on board and we casted it, and I was able to cast that for the first time with ZP, who also was brought onto Overwatch League at one point. And man, when I tell you that, I still think this to this day. When I tell you that, even for a fun event, it was a joke event, nothing serious. It wasn't even like a mock serious event. It was truly like Kefri was there as the sole Widowmaker player, and he had 5 Mercies like damage boost him. That's how much of a joke of a tournament it was, like for fun, right? It was still super hard for me to commentate. What a different experience it was for me to go from casting the pace of a platform fighter like Smash Brothers and then casting a shooter 6v6 that was Overwatch 1. And even though it was for fun, I was talking about all my personal experiences playing the game, but man, the pacing was on
It's a completely different pace. That's what I was going to say. That I assume that because everyone who comes on always talks about like they play the games, they watch the games, so they're up to date with all the latest. Like when some games guns roll P or different maps or different spawnings and head glitches and everything else. But then the pacing from Smash Bros to Overwatch and going to Apex, like they're completely different. Like that must have been the biggest like change.
It was, and it was still, I would still say to this day, the biggest learning experience for me within my career. It also made me, in my opinion, I felt the biggest improvement as a commentator, having to learn the different pacing, because it's not just with the game pacing, you're also learning what a real traditional play-by-play and color commentator is. In Smash Brothers, if you go back even into the olden days, I would still say now with Ultimate, there is no such thing as proper rules of play and color. You could try to force it, but the natural pace of the game will not allow you to have, here's a time for colored commentators to speak with analysis. Oh, now they're hitting each other. Here's a time where play could go in. That doesn't exist because there's a lot of trading. The conditioning aspect could fall under the umbrella of being an analysis, but then play could talk about what they're doing in terms of like when they're about to hit each other or set up for a combo. It just doesn't exist. But in Overwatch, that game has always been perfectly paced to allow, okay, all these ults are up. Analyst has talked about what is about to happen for this fight or what needs to be done depending on like where the positioning of the teams are or the time that is left for the teams to take whatever point. And then the ultimate start as the analysis just said it, and the play-by-play takes over. Overwatch is amazing pacing for traditional play-by-play and color. And that was my learning experience because I had to learn what a real color and play-by-play commentator actually did. And then in that, I had to learn what I am. What do I excel in? What am I best at? And then I look back at my Smash Brothers commentary and I think to myself, what can I build off of my style and allow it to be complemented in a more traditional style of Overwatch? So that was a really big learning curve for me that I didn't even figure out at the time of the Overwatch Hero Rumble event in Taiwan, because that also didn't really have the best pacing since it was more of a fun event for content creators. But it was a kind of like me dipping my toes into what could be and what I had to figure out. And that was the drive of, oh, I wanted to get better as a competitor, but now I really want to get better as a commentator. And that's kind of what started that journey for me.
Awesome. And so nowadays, obviously, I mentioned Apex. Again, you're sort of bouncing from different styles. Like, again, did you lean on the experience of non-right? It was a complete change of pace going from Smash to Overwatch. Did you preemptively go, right, go on to Apex? I know, again, it's going to be good. Did you spend a lot of time, like, did you play Apex much, first of all?
Yes.
So, right,
yes.
okay, so you again, you've done the thing of you played the game, so you can lean on that side of it. But again, was the pacing again the biggest factor when you move up? And by the way, I absolutely love watching that. Again, for me, Apex was a game that I played. I try to. So I'm CDL, so I've always been Call of Duty. I dabble a bit in Valorant, but Apex again is another game that I can watch the streams of Apex and be addicted to everything that's going on, because when it's final circle, as it were, like when it's getting to the end, it's crazy. It reminds me similar to what it's like on Fortnite when it gets to the final sort of stages. There's so much going on that it must, like, being able to actually like commentate on that must be so difficult.
I would say that the journey of having to go from Smash to Overwatch and then Apex was the perfect learning experience for me, because I know that this is not going to make much sense unless you've dabbled with both games a lot. But for me, when I first got into Apex, it was in the middle of the pandemic. It was literally like April 2020. And I got into it because Overwatch hadn't seen an update for nearly 2 years. So I started feeling like I needed a change of pace. But this is where it's going to sound weird. When I first got into Apex, it was the most Smash-esque shooter that I ever played. Now, what do I mean by that? It had the elements of abilities and counterpicking that you could see in Overwatch, right? But these counterpicks don't mean much when you're dealing with 60 players in a lobby and you're dealing with 20 other teams. You don't know what you're up against. So in Apex, I immediately took on this mindset of option coverage and what I could do while learning how to be a better shooter. The shooting was what came first to me very easily, but then everything else with rotations, the map, knowing especially inventory management was a huge thing for me. I picked up on it really quick. My first season playing Apex was season 5, which was the season that Loba came out. So I think I played the last week of season 4 because I remember Revenant being a thing, and then I remember Loba immediately coming out. And when I first got into that season, that's when I was at a high enough level to play rank. And my first rank split, I got, I believe, Diamond 4. So I picked up on it really quick. I still stood by with what I was. I had my problems in Overwatch, which was I had trust issues with teammates. But this time it wasn't me and 5 other people. It's me and 2 other people, and I still stuck with solo queuing. And I learned how much easier it was to grow in that game versus having to be a solo queuer in Overwatch and being at the mercy of people who didn't want to swap or didn't communicate. I was a very big person on communication. That ended up faltering in the future. I ended up not communicating as much, I guess. But I think it ended up having to do with trusting more randoms, which is never a good thing. But I still did it, and it worked out for me. I gave myself a rule, though. I knew I wanted to commentate Apex. I knew a few months into playing the game because I was addicted to it. I would pull all-nighters. I mean, when Horizon came out, that was my favorite season. Season 7 was a huge thing for me. I almost got my first 20 bomb and everything like that. And I told myself, I want to cast this game. And season 7 was when Olympus dropped. So I told myself, I won't cast this game until I could recall every single POI on the map for World's Edge and Kings Canyon. And so that was my own personal rule. I made a lot of friends, and I actually joined a few clans in Apex, right? So that was like the new rejuvenating, hey, I'm kind of in my own community in these games. And I used to not talk to anybody about what I did. So I was very like, and with all the friends that I made in all these communities, I never told anybody that I was a commentator. I never said anything about anything like that. I never told anyone I did Overwatch League. I was very to myself. And the friends that I played with in Apex were solely Apex players. So it was nice. It kind of was like a, and then when they did find out and they were like, why haven't you been casting Apex? That's when that was a different story. So eventually I had the opportunity to cast Apex, and I started small like I did with Smash. Overwatch was kind of like, welcome to the deep end. Like, you're in the gulag, time to figure things out quick. And again, that helped me grow as quickly as I could. But with Apex, I was able to start small. I didn't know where to start. So I originally reached out to old former people that I've worked with in Smash Brothers. You may recognize them. They go by Esports Arena. And Esports Arena used to host the biggest Smash 4 tournaments. For anybody who's like new blood, they held 2 of the biggest tournaments, one of them being Civil War, and there was another one called 2GGC Championship, where they invited all the Japanese players. Literally, the top 10 players were invited into one venue, and they all played for a trophy. And back in the day, in those eras, like we didn't have tournaments like that for Smash Brothers. Remember, like we were all grassroots, so that was another level. And then I see during the pandemic that they moved away from Smash because everything's online, and they started hosting Series E Apex tournaments. And that was an open bracket for anybody to join. And if you did really well for that week, you were able to play the day afterwards, which was their pro day. And their pro league day had like literally the pro league teams like TSM, C9, all these crazy teams. So I saw that these tournaments were happening. I didn't know the players. This is a new scene for me. Imagine learning over like 100 top 10 top 100 players for Smash. You're learning like what, 13, 15 teams in Overwatch League, from the APAC teams to the North American teams. And now you're here in Apex and you're learning a bunch of new names. You see the same team names, but different teammates in these teams, obviously TSM being a staple, Team Liquid. And I'm like, okay, the next learning hurdle isn't the game, it's the community. So I got involved with casting their locals, and I learned so much casting. And I was happy as Ken V casting those locals. I fell in love even deeper with the game and the community. And from there, that's kind of how it started things for me. And I was reached out to by one of the representatives of EA and the ALGS. I'll never forget this phone call. It was like, I want to say 2 months into starting out how to cast Apex. And she calls me on Discord and she goes, hey, have you ever considered like casting for the ALGS? And I remember I did not play it cool at all. I immediately was like, ALGS Apex? Like, I was more excited then at like 23 hearing about casting Apex than I was at like 19, 20 being called by Nintendo. Like, that was great for me. I was super happy, but this was like another level of excitement for me because it was the first time that I played the game first and then I got to casting it. It happened with Overwatch, but I never in my mind thought I would ever be able to cast it. In Apex, I've already had so much experience casting that I didn't want to get into casting yet because I wanted to make sure I was on point to not tarnish my reputation. I wanted to make sure I was doing everything right. I was very obsessed with making sure that I was going about things in a proper way. So when I got that phone call and I felt so confident, it was like Christmas.
And what did a team like at Apex? Because obviously, for some for myself, that I love watching all these events, and you've got all the guys involved. I mean, Ray and Day, I absolutely adore. Like we've had some great chats when we've been. I was lucky when we were out in Vegas in November, and I had the most amazing chat with him. And you see the other guys who get involved in it. What is it like working with everyone? I assume, because I imagine the industry, I always say that the gaming industry is an incredible industry where when I go to these award events, everyone is so happy to see each other and like, oh, I've seen you do this, I've seen you do this, and everyone has each other's back. But there must be an element of like, there's a competition. Like people want to be the people who are casting at these events. So you'll have people underneath you who are pushing you to be the best version of yourself when you're doing events. What is it like working with everyone, especially with like at the Apex events at the moment?
I don't know if it's just because I haven't ever felt that competitive feel with like coworkers or anything like that, but I've always been somebody to want to grow. Like especially in Smash, that wasn't a big thing, was wanting to have casters grow and be able to cast those majors. I never saw it as like, oh, I'm being shifted out. To me, it was like we needed more talent. So I guess that mindset always carried over. Even in Overwatch, when I was starting out with contenders, Overwatch League did something that I really wish every circuit or league of any sort would do, which was they would have certain weekends that their Overwatch League commentators would take an hour out of their day to VOD review with the contenders casters, like tier 2 casters.
Right.
And then we would pause and we would see what we could do differently, what could be better. I never had that experience anywhere else. And still to this day, I haven't. And I learned a lot from that. I think the person who was reviewing my VOD footage with my co-caster at the time, Herix, was Uber. I think it was Uber or Mr. X, one of the two. And I mean, I knew who they were, but I was more like, instead of being starstruck, I was more like, I need to pay attention. Like this is class right now, right? In Apex scene, I had so many amazing people I worked with, whether it be from the Challenger circuit, because I casted everything in Apex. Like I wanted to get involved with everything. I cast a Challenger circuit with new names that I boosted their names so hard that now one of them specifically that I always like vouch for, he's casting the ALGS with me. So to see that level of growth with so many different casters in the scene, Like, I try to boost up everybody that I work with, because everyone I work with, they're talented. They're where they're at for a reason. And to see people get that recognition that they deserve. I mean, in this past esports awards, all my co-casters that I've worked with, they all got awards.
Yeah,
Like,
they
how
crushed it.
amazing it is
Yeah.
to say that. Like, I'm working with this like all started lineup. Like, this is amazing. And I was nominated for play-by-play commentator of the year, not this past year. I believe it was the year prior. Unfortunately, I have not been able to make it out to the esports awards myself physically in person, since I live in Miami. Vegas is a bit far away. So unfortunately, the stars just had not aligned. But this past esports award, I had the biggest FOMO, because I saw a venue of every single person I've worked with in the industry from all these different titles under one roof. And I thought that was super cool. So I love that. It's literally one big family to me.
Yeah, that's been my takeaway from these awards. So I'm lucky enough where each year I get I go out and I dare say I'm just there to help it run smoothly. I'm not directly employed by them. I'm lucky enough to know the CEO amongst other things, and I get to see everyone have these interactions. And the podcast came from 2 years worth of being out in Vegas in this incredible venue, just talking to people, saying, "Oh, listen, I'm not here to hype you up too much, but I love seeing what you do. I'm thinking of doing a podcast one day. I'd love to have a chat about it." And it's just blossomed to that. And that's what I say about the community, is that everyone there is there to hype each other up. Like, they all love it, and everyone's the exact same, whether in the CDL or any other form of esport. They're just there going, "Oh, what you do this? That was incredible." Oh, if you... And I've heard the conversation. Like I said, I was in a sports bar watching. It was 2 years ago. The World Cup was on, and then Hungbox just comes and sits down because obviously Argentina are there, and he's just and he's just sat there just talking, and I'm just like, when you have to try and hold back, and like you said, it's like I'm not gonna be some sort of like, "Oh my God, I've seen you do this." I have to play it very cool and very soft. But everyone is so genuine and so nice that, like, and I always say to the people that listen that it's one thing to watch all these events on Twitch or on YouTube, but I can't recommend enough going to these events and getting a live experience of it, because it's like sports. It's like, it's one thing to watch it on TV, but to actually go and experience himself is a completely different game, and people need to get out and do it more. What have you got for coming up this year? What's the next event for you that you've got coming up?
So I got ALGS land coming up, actually. Speaking of Apex, yeah, I got land coming up. Our first split one, land 2. That's gonna be at the end of, well, rather the start of May. So I'll be traveling at the end of this month of April, but it starts the very first week of May. So that's gonna be the next big thing to look at, and it will be happening in LA.
I was just
So
about to say, that's in LA, isn't it? Right.
yeah. Yep, it's gonna be that, and then after that, it's probably gonna be some Smash tournaments with some more Apex sprinkled on top.
Awesome. In terms of, if there was a game now that you could have the opportunity of getting involved in that you haven't yet, is there any that you'd love to get involved in?
Ooh, so 2 games have come to mind recently, because I have dabbled in thinking about, but I have this rule where I can't cast games that I don't play, as it's seen before. So the games that I have played before but have dropped and have thought about playing them again. Halo, 3 games: Halo, Call of Duty, and Fortnite.
I
All
had the fun
shooters.
of, I was chatting to Blaze yesterday, so we've got Blaze's podcast coming up, and he talks about he's got the Halo event, and they're coming over to London this year, which I've already sorted tickets. I cannot wait. Like, being someone in the UK, I'm having to watch all these events go on from afar. And like I said, I'm lucky enough to do the awards each year out in the States. But other than that, anytime they come over to the UK, it's like, anyone I talk to over here, and they're like, you have to get yourselves to these events, because they're just insane. All the time that you do around these events, how do you chill? And
Ooh.
first of all, like, because as part of that, I want to know, do you watch other forms of like esports content? Like, do you have Twitch or YouTube open at all times, watching what other people are doing, trying to learn how other people? Yeah. So who
I
are your
do.
go-to? Who do you watch? Who is normally on your screen?
I usually watch a lot of Nicewig, just to have not only is it great background noise, let's say I'm doing something else, but it's great because I learn a lot too of other players that I may not be able to see from other regions because time zone differences. I watch a lot of Nicewig, and then I like to support a lot of my friends on Twitch. I watch EE, who's a Smash Brothers commentator, TK whenever I can. I always try to support like my mutuals, but when it comes to other tournaments or making sure that I know what I'm doing, depending on what tournaments I'm doing, like when I did a lot of Overwatch League, I watched a lot of Plat Chat. I would like to listen to the discussions that was being had with the matches to look forward to. Let's say I'm getting ready for Apex tournament. I would rewatch a previous broadcast, whether even if I'm on it, like I would try to mute myself a little bit because I want to hear like more so what my co-casters are talking about. But I would look back at previous Apex broadcasts and see what's going on there. Or other Smash Brothers tournaments. I've once had Smash on one screen, Apex that I'm not casting on that specific day on another screen, and I'm just there watching everything, and then I'll be playing like a different video game on a bigger screen. So I've done that while because I have like my relaxing games too. I'm not always like in competitive mode. I play a lot of casual Genshin, so I have that in the background while all the more bigger tournaments are happening in front of me that I'm not participating in for that weekend.
I was going to ask, are there games that you what sort of games do you enjoy to play then that aren't these competitive where you it sounds like I reckon you'd get into games that you can grind, like you were mentioning how like over the early Smash days how you like do you like those sort of games where it's more of a grind and you're putting a lot of work in, or like, I found myself playing Power World and I can't stop, and I'm trying to get out of it, but every time I play a different game, so I'll load up Call of Duty and I'll load up League of Legends, but I always find my way back to it.
I've always been such a crazy grinder. I love games that I could grind, and there's not really like an end goal in sight. Like I love Genshin. I love building my characters. I don't like just the aside from the open world aspect of it, it's like the completionist in me. I want to make sure I find every puzzle, every chest. I want to have the best builds and the best characters for those builds, especially since, you know, it being a gacha game, you have to make sure if you do spend any money that it's well worth for that money. But then moving around from Genshin, my roots as a kid growing up, aside from shooters and all that stuff, was always grinding with old school RuneScape. So I
Mm.
used to play a
Oh,
lot of old school RuneScape. So that was another example of just unnecessary grinding just for diaries and quest requirements and to say, hey, I have it, or like I have this pet and you don't, haha, like things like that. So I like to just play a lot of grinding games or games that I could grind to complete eventually.
um, I have a silly question which I've started asking everyone at the end of podcast, which I'll save this because I had one that popped to mind. For people who are wanting to get involved in like commentary or casting that, what do you think is the most important start? Do you think it's grinding a game, or do you think there are other things that's more important when it comes in? Because I do you feel like it's more about the personality of the caster, or is it the knowledge of what it is they're saying? Like, what do you think is the most important factor?
I think both, honestly. You have to stand out because if you just recite things like frame data and stuff like that, you're gonna sound like you're AI. Like
Yeah.
ChatGPT is the one casting, right? I think both is very important. I use my experience playing these games to seep into my commentary so that way when something crazy happens, I've been there, I've done it. Like I may not be as good as these players, but I've been able to relive these crazy moments myself so I could add personality and emotion behind certain plays. I think it is very different getting involved in commentary now than it was when I first started out. Back then, if we were doing this podcast and you asked me this question, I would say go to your locals, grind at your locals, play and see what you could do, get to know all the players in your locals, and then make sure that from those locals you cast regionals and then nationals. Now, I would say similarly a similar suit, but with the evolution of like tech, social media being as important as it is, making content and all that stuff, putting yourself out there would require you to make sure that you know what you're talking about so you can make content based off of those games, whether it be the competitive scene or the game itself. Making sure that as a commentator, you watch these different streams, you get to know these players, you figure out where they come from, how the other commentators want to go about it, and practice that, but specifically supporting tier 3 and anything below that. Anything grassroots or tier 3 that is being ran, you have to start somewhere. I didn't just Overwatch was an anomaly, but with Apex, I fully went involved in that game thinking to myself, like, what is the lowest that I could start in? Because I have to practice somewhere. I can't just start off the top because if I did, it's not going to be the same as it was if I practiced it for 2 years. So I started with just weekly tournaments. Starting with the very bottom, it wasn't even tier 2 at the time. It was considered community ran tournaments. So I would say making sure you know which events are happening, who's hosting these events, and seeing what you could do to get to know these players. Even if they're just a one-off player, they show up for one tournament, you never see them again. You never know. Maybe they'll come up in a few years and you could be the only one to say, hey, I know that guy.
Yeah, we've had people always mention that a lot of it is about the grind. Like, there's a lot of people who really like a game, and there's a lot of people who can talk about a game that they've played. But it's that difference between putting the grind in and, like you said, understanding from the bottom to the top who these people are, where they started, where they've come from, what's their story. So then when you're talking about them and certain things are happening, when you're reacting to something that's happening there and then, it's not just a reaction of the play, but it's a reaction of how that could directly affect that person. Like you said, if you can lean on experience from stuff they've done years back, that's going to kind of aside from other people. The I guess it's a silly question, even though I actually think it's interesting to see how people react to this. So I give everyone the opportunity to set up their own. I use the esports awards as like a sort of standard, but what I want you to do is there's going to be a red carpet event, there's going to be a musical act, and there's going to be hosts of your own award show. So this is your award show. So someone's coming up to you and going, right, I want an award show, unlimited budget. I need 2 people to host the red carpet, and these can be people that you've worked with, but they can be celebrities. I've had Ryan Seacrest shout outs. I've had John Cena presenting the awards. I suggested John Cena post Oscars, you know, naked, get John Cena out there, it'd make it work. Like for the red carpet event, also, I need to know a location of where you'd want it to be. Now, Miami sounds like a perfect location, but is there somewhere else where you'd, I mean, imagine South Beach and just
I've always said that I've wanted more events here in South Florida forever. Miami is such a, I understand though, budget wise, and it's kind of far for a lot of people. So I get the geography of why some people don't navigate here. But my goodness, it is so beautiful. You know, when you catch it on a great day, especially recently, it's been very windy. It's hot, obviously, but then between like winter to spring, it's that nice breezy, like late 60 degrees Fahrenheit into like that nice weather, not a cloud in the sky. Miami Beach, I would absolutely host it in Miami Beach. And if we want to keep the theme, the kids may not remember him, but I'll have Pitbull open up the floor right there and then,
Mr.
like
Worldwide.
Mr. Worldwide.
So you're having him on the red carpet, but would anyone need to be with him, or would you just have Pitbull there? Like, who do you think would back him up well?
Oh man, who would back up Pitbull?
I mean, that's a
amazing?
question in itself. Who can back up Pitbull? But
Jennifer Lopez. Jennifer Lopez.
listen,
Let's
the two of them.
go.
I was gonna say my shout out to Miami was. So I was saying I was in Miami about 10 years ago. I did a little bit of a tour across America, and we stayed in Miami for a few days, and then drove down to Key West, and I fell in love with Key West, like the Florida Keys and the
Key
full
West.
drive. And I remember just the place I was staying. I had a day of just on the beach staring and thinking to myself, just across that water is Cuba. And I was just it was the most perfect place. So listen, I'll shout to like South Florida. It's an unbelievable place. Musically, although we already have 2 musicians on the red carpet, who would you have performing?
Ooh, like okay, aside from who we just talked about. I guess this has already been done before, but I really like the BB No Money.
I am his biggest fan. So
Yeah.
2 years ago, when it was at the awards, I was moving all the trophies backstage the day before for preparation for the awards, and there was just constant beat just playing on repeat for Edamame. And I was like, and I was working with Santi, who's done an episode with me, and me and him were just there going, "This is addictive. Like it's an addictive beat." And then as we're walking, BB normally just walks down the middle and just starts pop up and just constantly doing repeat, and you couldn't not dance to it. Like it was obsessive. And then when he performed, he was unbelievable. And I've said I would have him every year. Like there's lots of people that could go out and do it, but he's a showman, man. He was a natural. And like they were like, "Will you present what?" "Yeah, sure, I'll present." And he was perfect.
I had the time of my life watching BB No Money's performance at that last esports award. Not this past one, but I believe it was was it this? No, it was the one before
2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun. But if I could say a rock band that I would love to perform, I'm gonna
I'd
be
love
biased
some
here.
heavy metal for me if you bring it
And I
on.
think it's very fitting because they've done some games, individual songs actually, for Call of Duty, and it would be my favorite band, Avenged Sevenfold.
Oh, perfect. Oh, if you get
Just Kiss.
I'm trying to think what song would be perfect, like Afterlife or something like that from Avenged.
Oh
Just
my
that,
gosh, I
oh,
love Afterlife. That's actually what that's my favorite song. Funny enough,
Beast
you
in the
nailed
Heart.
it.
And I remember I had a gig and it was Disturbed. So it was Avenged Sevenfold supported by Disturbed, and it was perfect for me. It's like I said, Disturbed for me. It's gone slightly back to the theatre stuff. Like when they perform, it's like a theatre show. Like it is heavy rock music, but performed so well. And then Avenged come out and just tear the roof down there. That'd be insane. I'd love to see the reaction of everyone there as well. There'll be some people that will not be ready for what they bring out.
I would be going crazy because then also me being so close to Event Sevenfold in the vicinity, like that would have me
And we need extra
sweating.
security. Is that what we'll need you?
Yeah,
So
actually.
just because you're running the awards, you can't be anywhere. You can't be within 20 meters of these guys. And then host wise, so two hosts who you haven't hosted it.
Are we talking about like famous people, or are we talking about like locally in the community?
Do you know what? It can be out of you. You can say both if you want. You can give like an honorable mention for who would be your guys who like the people you know, and then like who would you think would be of more of a celebrity extreme level.
Man, they're the two people that I love like working with them, especially like I've worked with amazing hosts, don't get me wrong, but the two people that make it feel like it's literally like their personality, like what they were born to do. Rain Day, who is in the LGS, and
Rain
Stella, who's
Days.
also now part of the LGS. But Rain Day is like they're both amazing. But Rain Day, for some reason, the way that he speaks, the way he bridges things together, he's like an all natural when it comes to
The
hosting.
conversations I had with him, and like I said, we'd never met before, and it was like I'd known him for 20 years. Like the conversation and just talking about like soccer and stuff. And I remember on the night of the awards, he was hosting one of the awards, and it was my job to basically locate him within this nightclub. And I said, listen, he always dresses well as well. Let's be honest, like you can
Oh
spot
yeah.
him in a nice suit. He knows how to look good. And I was there, like, I was trying to find him, and I saw him start walking towards the bar, and I was like, no, that's my guy. I need you ready. So I walked up to him and just went, you're up next to the award. I was like, all right, let's go. And he was boss. He was unreal. And he's so natural. I just walked straight on, killed it, walked off. And who's on with him then? So you've got Rain Day. Who's going to be with him?
I really love Stella when she hosts for Twitch Rivals too, IGN. She's amazing host when it comes to navigating through questions and different topics. I feel like she's also very natural at it too. Those are the two people in mind that I've worked with that are amazing. Even Zoe. I mean, there's so many amazing people. Zoe's amazing host
Yeah.
too. Um, I would say those celebrity wise, I would love if Jack Black opened up the awards. Can you
He's a
imagine? That
nat
would
like I miss the fact that he doesn't do more of his YouTube posts where he's like him playing Red Dead and stuff. Like, I was addicted to that. Like he'd be perfect. He could do everything, Jack Black.
Jack Black would be so perfect. I already know he would open it up super goofy too. Either Jack Black or I'm trying to think about somebody else who would just blow up opening things. Maybe The Rock. He does everything. Let's get The
We've
Rock
had
to
The
open
Rock,
it
as I
up.
mentioned before. Yeah, I agree. Like The Rock and Jack Black as well. They've done stuff with Jumanji and other films. They'd bounce off each other. They'd be perfect at it. Awesome, right? I'll get that booked in then. So South Florida. It's going to cost a bit, but I'll get them in. Thank you so much for coming on. For the guys who have listened who want to find more what you've done, and obviously we know that we've got the Apex coming up, so they can check it out on there. But where can people find you on socials?
Yeah, you guys can find me at VikkiKitty on Twitter. That is VikkiKitty. Same tag for Twitch as well as Instagram.
Awesome. Again, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone listening, again, any feedback you have, send it my way. If there's anyone that you want to have on, again, let me know. I've had people recommend people from, like I said, although I follow a lot of Koji and stuff, I've had a lot of shout outs for different people. We've had Spider Tiff. We've done a recon of that we come up soon because people were telling me how great she was, and I'd followed
She's
her a little
amazing.
bit, and then I spent a good day watching everything that she'd done, and she was a rock star. She was amazing. So if there's anyone that you want to see on, just let me know. But in the meantime, for everyone listening, just keep gaming until next time.